let me ask you to give a brief overview on the role of education per se and the role of higher education in promoting social justice.
Of course, I will speak from the American perspective. In my role as Associate Dean, I manage the global and strategic partnerships.
So as an educator, how do you look at the Indian context?
It's a very, very important question. And I think something that the development sector, the public policy sector, as you've mentioned, has been struggling with, in the sense that we've been talking about it for decades. Yet the movement has been slow in many places. But of course, in India,
if you may move further, like in India, there's a churning process. There are a lot of transition, a lot of transformation occurring. And how do you look at these private universities promoting relevant higher education, promoting leadership?
For me, the question is how institutions, public and private, are going to collaborate with each other to share knowledge and experience.
On behalf of the School of Liberal Arts and Humanities at Woxsen University, it is a pleasure to have Professor Ravi Lakshmikanthan with us from Brandeis University, the Heller School for Public Policy and Management. He has over 15 years of teaching experience, and he's accompanying Professor Laurence from Brandeis University. Welcome to this podcast. Let me ask you to give a brief overview on the role of education per se and the role of higher education in promoting social justice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here with you. Of course, I will speak from the American perspective. In my role as Associate Dean, I manage the global and strategic partnerships and the initiatives that the Heller School undertakes. And the role of higher education, from my perspective, especially in the US context, working with students from all over the world. The Heller School is one of the graduate schools at Brandeis University. The School of Social Policy is over 70% international. So the students are coming from all over the world, the majority of the students, which is a very unusual model in a graduate school of social policy. Maybe in the School of Business or the School in the Sciences, you'll find a large international population. But for people thinking about social policy, development practitioners, education, health, gender, rights, bringing them from all over the world is a really critical part of the formula for creating a body of knowledge that transcends boundaries. And that's really what we try to do at Brandeis University. And the reason why I stay there, in the sense that the reason why I think it's so special, is that institutions in the United States attract students from all over the world and also can provide a level of support that is something that's different than other institutions. Even private institutions and public institutions equally are part of this endeavor, international student endeavor. We receive so many international students from all over the world that it's a beautiful place to work and to experience. So the role of higher education, in my experience, is to bring people from different schools of thought together to think critically about the issues that we face as a global community.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you. If I may ask you to delve into the issue of inclusion in education in terms of the very concept of social justice in an Indian milieu. It's very important that right from the time of framing of the Constitution to our public policy, good governance, we have been talking about it, but then the social justice is also to be fully, in its entirety, we have not yet fulfilled. Still, we have quite a many marginalized and vulnerable groups in India, with a paradox to give an example that India on one side boasts that it is almost at the fourth in the GDP ranking in the world. But on the other side, when you look at the Human Development Index, we are somewhere around around 130s. So this sounds very paradoxical that economically we are growing as a part of this globalization process, but it looks like we do have quite a many socioeconomic issues unaddressed, and particularly the social equity, social justice, inclusion remains a dream. So as an educator, how do you look at the Indian context?
It's a very, very important question. And I think something that the development sector, the public policy sector, as you've mentioned, has been struggling with, in the sense that we've been talking about it for decades. Yet the movement has been slow in many places. But of course, in India, compared to other countries which have been able to work on this for a long time, it's its infancy, so it's just starting. In places like the United States, it's not as visible, but we have the same problems with marginalized communities. And we should be much farther ahead in providing access to resources that will allow the population, the marginalized populations, to have health, education at an equal level. But I would say that we've seen a trend in the political structures of our countries, respective countries, that have not facilitated this discussion well. So for me, in the education sector, it's about bringing practitioners, real practitioners from the ground, who are working on these issues like you work on these issues with local communities, and then having a ripple effect. That is the only way that this will work. It has to start from the ground up, not from the top down. So the policy infrastructure has to be there, but you have to develop a cohort of people who care about these issues. And the way that that happens is on these campuses. The campuses like Woxsen and like Brandeis, where we encourage the students to start thinking about and talking about, discussing, critically thinking about these issues that will change their communities, that will change their families. And that's the way I think that the change happens. And then eventually they will go become policymakers, decision makers, politicians. And I believe in that future. I really do believe in that future. I've seen it happen. And I think we've committed our careers to educating students and helping them find their voice in this field, working with marginalized communities.
Also now, as an expert who had done research on the role of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa as a global South, solidarity, we have a forum and they do nurture a lot of cooperation, fostering research, educational cooperation and exchanges. As a researcher in that very field, how do you look at the role of BRICS in promoting higher education and addressing social justice as well?
It's so exciting because the economic power of these nations is so immense that the potential to have real change in the way that institutions and organizations and people within these countries collaborate and communicate, it's exponential. And so I think that what my work focuses on is trying to identify what structures and mechanisms these articulation agreements are utilizing in order to leverage the economic power. Because a lot of the discussion about BRICS is on the economic side. How are they going to trade? How are they going to partner with each other? But there is an education subtext which will allow the generation of knowledge between researchers who are doing work in the majority world, the 2/3 world in the global South. And so for me, thinking about how BRICS can learn lessons from how partnerships and collaborations occur effectively as they're growing and expanding. In January, many more nations joined the group: Argentina, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran. And so the group will continue to expand. And so we need to think about how we can facilitate a structure that will allow for effective leveraging of the policies and programs and the funding that will be available to benefit the students coming from these countries. The articulation agreements, the scholarship and knowledge generation. There is a great group of scholars from South Africa, for example, who are talking about decolonizing the curriculum. How do you change the narrative about how knowledge is created and shared? And how do you empower the BRICS scholars to be part of that discussion? They've been excluded traditionally from Western kind of focused knowledge creation. And so I think the narrative is changing. And because we're at the infancy, it's a very exciting place to be. So I think there's potential, great potential. Whether it's to be realized remains to be seen, but I think that we can help inform that discussion.
Very interesting indeed. You commented about the need for post-colonial perspectives, decolonizing education, and bringing in epistemic
Yes.
justice as a part of social justice.
Yes.
Interesting indeed.
Yes.
If you may move further, like in India, there's churning process. There are a lot of transition, a lot of transformation occurring in the realm of economy in particular. And we are trying to see how that could also impact the social equity, social transformations. And universities are now expanding. There are a lot of private universities
Yes.
like Woxsen University in the southern part, and you have many other universities emerging. And how do you look at these private universities promoting relevant higher education, promoting leadership, addressing some of the key issues of justice, equity, sustainability? How do you look at the role of these private universities in India particularly? This is a new change.
I honestly think that there are exciting opportunities. For me, the question is how institutions, public and private, are going to collaborate with each other to share knowledge and experience. I think this is an area that is growing. Many of the proposals that I've worked on, for example, through government agencies or external funding, involve tripartite agreements where we build in research from public and private institutions, funding mechanisms to provide the scholars who are working in these areas to collaborate with each other, for the students from these institutions to collaborate and learn from each other. I think that the demographics of each of these populations, the students that study in these institutions, is quite different. That means that there is such a rich depth of experiences that students and scholars can learn from each other. You're here, you have great experience working in the field, and I think you're bringing that directly to your students. Now, I think the next stage is to be able to share that with a wider audience. And you do that through your students and through your scholarship. And I think that building these partnerships between public and private, and even corporate partnerships, this kind of triangle of knowledge and sharing of experience is the way to go. You have a great AI lab, robotics lab, you have engineering, architecture, and social sciences. Bringing these worlds together and then allowing the students to understand how that interacts with the world, the wider world, with different perspectives is critical. This is a new endeavor. And so I think that for me also there's opportunity. I don't think it's been fully exploited yet in the sense that it's not happening to the extent that it should be happening. But part of what I do and part of what I research is about how this can come about, how we can work together. And I think there's a role for external funding to play a role in facilitating these types of discussions and collaborations. And that's where I work.
That's quite interesting. So you referred about Woxsen kind of universities which are promoting multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary education. And particularly, as you rightly pointed out, it works quite a lot on artificial intelligence, metaverse, machine learning, and things like that. How do you think that these new and emerging technologies will shape the role of education and social inclusion in particular, if I may ask you?
I think that we don't know. I think that artificial intelligence has a great potential. And I think that the students who are being educated now in these fields have a huge role to play in deciding how the future will look, which is why it's important that they don't just exist in their bubble, that they understand what the impact of these technologies will be on the wider world, including education. I met a couple of students working in health and AI, working on how rights-based approaches can be impacted by knowledge generation, sharing, and creation. And so I think that it's an exciting time for these students because we're at the ground floor. Although it's been happening for about 5 to 10 years, I think the next 5 to 10 years will be critical in understanding how the impact will play out for our societies. So I think the work that's being done here with the scholars, the students thinking about this, and I know they're thinking about this, and I hope that we'll have a chance to discuss this with your students and yourself. I think they'll play a critical role in defining what the future looks like, and they will have great opportunities to work and study in these fields. So, which is why I think what you're doing here is fantastic.
Good. A last question. What do you think are the scope for bridging the global north, global south? There are many arenas like climate change, to technology, to many other things. We are expecting to have more exchange, but still then there is a larger divide of north and south. Now, how do you look at the scope of universities like Woxsen collaborating with the universities like Brandeis? What do you think as a scope of collaboration in research and teaching?
I don't know if that's always the answer. I don't know if north, south, east, west is always the way to go. As I said, when I was working on funding research opportunities, it was really with the idea that we bring institutions within a country to start talking to each other. For example, TIS in Mumbai and Terry University in Delhi, even Woxsen and other institutions, they don't share the knowledge that's being generated by the students and the scholars. And we need to create mechanisms to do that within India, within BRICS. And then if there are scholars that are working on these issues in other countries, including the United States, let's bring them in, let's find them, and let's work together. But I think it's critical and necessary that institutions within India start thinking about India and working together to be one community. And I think that's happening, but not to the extent that it should be happening. This is my personal opinion. I don't know if you share that opinion or not, but I see when I go to different institutions in India, I see such wonderful scholarships. People like you who are so committed and dedicated to your scholarship and research that don't talk to each other, that don't have the opportunities to talk to each other. Not that they don't want to, but they don't have the opportunities. So let's facilitate and create that at the government level, at the institutional level, at the funding level. Let's promote that. I would love to see institutions in the West collaborating with a consortium of institutions in the South, in India, in China, in South Africa, and not be in isolation, a one-to-one relationship, because that does not further the global conversation. Let's bring in countries, institutions from countries around the world to start these discussions and work together in multidisciplinary groups. That's where I get excited personally with the opportunity to see that happen. And I hope that this visit and our talking to the students will spark those conversations and think about how we can collaborate as a community of institutions, because we're not in competition. We're really leveraging the strengths that you have. The entrepreneurship strength of Woxsen can leverage the work that's happening at TIFS. The students who want to start social enterprises, why not bring them together to start thinking about how the expertise here can leverage the work that's being done there? And just as an example. And to me, this is exciting.
Well said. Thank you very much for for this candid conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.